minor, it's very unlovely. It's stern. E minor is a very turbulent key. The E minor toccata is actually an early work, for instance, and I don't think there's any more sort of visceral for solo playing. And so I'm wondering whether Bach was one of our synesthetic friends, like Scriabin. Those musicians who would actually, hear a note and immediately see a color. Scriabin went so far as to associate not only certain colors with certain keys, but emotions with certain keys. And we've thought about various composers who might be synesthetic all through time. And I know that there's an E minor vibe that Bach has, and it's a very stormy one, and you really capture it beautifully. I have a couple of broad ideas that I think you'll find useful. The first one I want to talk about is the concept of note heads as placeholders. In other words, we have a dotted eighth note, and that would make us believe that we should play a full-length dotted eighth note. However, one of my other kind of pet peeves is that the two most depressing things about playing the piano are that every note that we play dies, and every stroke that we make is a downstroke. And I love that idea of an upstroke, so that we're not always down, because violinists have that sense of up bow and down bow, and it has a real balletic sense of grace to it. And I'm always looking for ways to really incorporate that into piano playing. And of course, the easiest way is to just put in, weak, sort of a little bow mark, and then a slash for stress. And that comes in very handy because in many of Bach's works, we have sometimes the end of one line, which we want to have as a soft release. The idea of having a phrase, or the idea of a phrase, the idea of a slur, is that these notes belong together. So we would like to have, within an implied group, a sense of an impetus to the beginning of the slur, sort of like Baroque bow. So it's not a strong accent. It's just they sort of lean into it, and they also come out at the end of the slur in a very light way. It's not about making a full sound, through the whole bow. It's about having a sense of lightness and upflow, and a sense of buoyancy. And so I look at that. I look at the idea of note lengths being variable to suit our needs. I mean, he didn't write it as an eighth note with a rest, so he obviously wants it to have some strong singing power. But I believe that we should look at this also in terms of where it falls in the bar. And so how do we convey that sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, boom, boom. It's not a downbeat. And so unless we instill in it some sense of up and down, of its relationship to the bar line, how are we going to do that? I always ask, what would Bach do? Meaning, how would we do this on the harpsichord? And for instance, all the notes would be the same volume, and so it's very, very hard to get a sense of shape in the line. What they would mostly do is use expansion of time between gestures, and also take into account that they do have very clear control of the release of notes. And so making that part of the thing of, well, if we want to make this an up sort of feeling, I think we're going to have to think of it as slightly short note. We want to have this be the landing. That's the landing. And even that is on a half bar, But this, that bespeaks a certain ideal, and I know very many famous Bach pianists who have played in a very expressive style, and then later in life, it just sounds like they're really just pushing it out there. And I think it's about a deep respect of some sort, but I really like a more engaged activity. I don't think we should pronounce the music. I think we should find the truth of the gesture and find whatever means we have to project that truth, to convey that truth to an audience. So the first thing that I would say is trying to get this sense of, first of all, I think the way to decide how to play it and how long to play it is to just imagine starting from the key and lift it off. Can you try that for me, Michelle? Just play that one note. But I want to see, I don't want to see you play it. I don't want to see you plant it. I want to see you lift it out of the keyboard. Good. You can even do it more. Yes, and now you're absolutely right. That's too short. So yeah, do it your way again. Okay, but then think of it really as an up. Good. And don't give yourself an upbeat. I see you doing this. And that's only going to make you make a percussive beginning. What we're trying to do is, I just want you to come from the key and lift it off. Do that. That's great. Do it again. Good. I saw you do a little knuckle upbeat. Don't mess with me. Do it again. Yes. And that has all kinds of, that sounded like a more languid sort of quarter note, but I only got that not from the actual length that you played, but from the gesture that you made. That's amazing. And you see how much variety there is in that. Now do that and go on. And now we're going to land on this strongly, but again, keep in mind that it's landing on a weak beat, right? So this is a motion, this is a motive in constant motion and never touches the ground. So the more we institute this sense of buoyancy and really having no rootedness, I understand the desire to make it authoritative and a little angry. I definitely find that here. But it's not all the piece. It's just this opening. Let me sit down for a second now because, actually, let me hear you try the theme once more, so we get that. No, I saw you make that upbeat. Okay, good, excellent. Now, excellent. And I think just to have a visual cue, right? One of these little up bow squiggles when we want to have a visual cue saying this is an up. We want to have an up, an up impetus. Now, I also am a great believer in thinking ahead in terms of not imposing an idea of the dynamic, but allowing the material, the combination of voices, the community of voices, the conversation of voices, to determine the tempo. So yes, I like your initial impetus, but now we have to deal with that. I think first of all we need to start from a little bit lower, even if we want to end. But if we start here, then we're just spinning our wheels, So, do you hear that? How that has direction. And we can also do that with not only dynamics, but having an idea of the space. We call it the agogic amount of space between voices, between voice entrances. Agogic can also be used to span the space between 16th notes so that we can use a little bit of shape in our intonation. So here, we should be thinking more Schubert's spinning song now than toccata. You hear what I'm saying? Because here's the other most important skill in playing the piano, I contend, is the ability to do this. Tap your head and rub. Can you do it? Okay. Can you do the other hand? You're much better. Are you right-handed?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all that's about. But we need to be able to do two things at once. So here we have. This is just musing, and it's also not necessarily because it's twice as fast as an eighth note, it's going to be more exciting, twice as exciting as an eighth note. We need to look for the character of this. And I see this as a very mellifluous, sinuous, insinuating. And what's going to be really interesting is when we have the right hand and the left hand doing different things. I believe that we should really institute a great deal more sensitivity in terms of what I call intonation, is the Russian term for it. Intonation is really how we project the space between one note and another. Not in time, but in dynamics. And so I'm thinking of this. If I go up, I get a little bit louder. If I go down, I definitely get softer. And the hard thing about that is it's very easy to build up the sound. I mean, you know that. It's very exciting the way you play. It's very difficult to get softer, to cut back. And yet, this is going to be a lot clearer if we make the left hand. We won't have to work so hard on the right hand at all. It'll come out because we've got a legato texture in the left hand. Do you hear that? I've got to play the right notes, it'll be more improved. So we want to find the truth in each of these figures, and then respect the contrasting, the sometimes contrasting motives. One of my favorite places was whenever you would come to this kind of movement. And there's one more aspect of this that I would like to encourage you, which is we use a gajic. In other words, we put little pieces of space between voice entrances. This fits very nicely under the hand. But you see he's written it as two voices. So I say we need to acknowledge every exchange of voices, because otherwise it just sounds like one voice. So I suggest putting a gajic space in between this and here, and then back again. It's not a matter of bringing anything out. As a matter of fact, if I use that space, I don't really, we're singing away. And also, if I'm a little bit more sensitive with again, using the left hand at whatever length I think is going to be really helpful. Like for instance, I'm actually crescendoing in terms of length. If we start out, it's very exciting, but it's all the same thing. And so I'm saying length can be variable. We don't have to get louder even. We can create a sense of tension by starting out short and getting louder. We can expand the space as I'm mentioning it, so that we are actually much more climactic at this point. All of that helps us, and all of it is worth thinking about, because those are the types of things that we could do on the harpsichord, that we can do even better on the piano. For instance, the other thing this place here, we really have to allow each voice its independence. I tend to take, first of all, take much greater care in, and you definitely made a very firm and confident decision to do these as echoes. That was in itself a beautiful recognition of recognizing that the content, the local content we are playing, is determinative of everything. Determinative of pace, determinative of dynamics, of dynamic shape. So this one, that there's a songfulness to this one. It doesn't have to be an echo. It shouldn't really necessarily be an echo, because it's a continuous stream of notes, and we can find other ways of connecting or disconnecting in terms of clarity. And I like this idea of maybe that's the motive. And so maybe we don't want to hear both voices in tandem in contrary motion. Maybe we want to hear. When I come to places like this, I first of all follow very closely the dynamic contour, and then the next thing that I do is figure out a way to make one more prominent without necessarily bringing it out. So, and especially when we have two voices with exactly the same figuration, except in mirror, right? And you have to figure out a way to differentiate that. So what I do is I say, I'm going to do the right hand initially fairly legato, and the left hand will not be legato. So in other words, it's just a subtle, I call it shifting the mirror. It's like we're looking at the same thing, but we're just seeing it from a slightly different angle. And we don't even have to, and you can still do the echo, but maybe not this time, or maybe not every time. I'm just saying, I'm trying to show you that there are many things that we can take responsibility for that seem like an onerous task, like going in completely different dynamic directions, going up in the right hand, down in the left hand. That's actually even better reason to do my shifting the mirror based on who's getting high, right? And now this guy, right? Right? That makes sense. And that really feeds into our dynamic contours, and it falls very beautifully into this idea of shifting the mirror, especially in parallel motions. You can start hearing this stuff as just harmony. We always have to have a very firm sense of differentiation between the voices. But the nice thing about acknowledging this exchange of voices. So what I'm doing is I'm inserting a gogic before each voice exchange. And the nice thing is that since, I would have a hard time really figuring out, it's a very long sequence. How do we shape it? I think we shape it in accommodation and collaboration with the upper lines. So if you think that this sounds too crazy, that's exaggerated. But I can accommodate that by making slight deviations and variations in how I approach the left hand. So I don't even have to think about how I want to play the left hand. We can just decide it based on how he wants us to play the left hand, or how these upper two voices needing to accommodate each other and recognize each other and do that voice exchange need the left hand to play the passage. If I were doing it in slow motion, I would. There's just that little bit of space that defines it. We are aware of different voices. And my thing, finally and first, is the idea that Bach was primarily a composer of vocal music. And so, I've listened to so many beautiful cantata arias, soprano, countertenor, what have you, and it's just great. And then we come and play this stuff on the keyboard, and we think, oh well, I guess this is just going to be pretty dry and respectful, and that'll be that. We have to really try and make the piano sing. That's the whole idea of it. And it's really not about pronouncing, it's about sensitivity to the contours and to the voice exchanges, to allow the content itself to dictate tempo, dynamics, pace, agogic space. All of this has to come, I think, from here. So as many wonderful ideas as you had, as far as how you wanted to shape it dynamically, I would, and I don't need for you to change your performance right now, but in your further work, I think this is stuff worthy of experimentation. Do you think? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much.